Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to discuss another interesting topic, and that is the Fermi Paradox, which is usually framed as a very simple question. If the universe is so vast, then, and filled with so many stars and planets, then where is everybody? So why in a cosmos that seems large enough for life to arise many times, have we found no clear evidence of other intelligent civilizations? And indeed, that's a fascinating question, and one that has led to many possible explanations. Maybe intelligent life is extremely rare, or maybe civilizations do not last very long. Maybe advanced life exists, but it is far too away, too quiet, or too different from what we know to detect. So these are all interesting possibilities. But I want to approach the Fermi paradox from a slightly different angle, because I think the paradox may not only be about silence of the universe. I think also there are very interesting limits in terms of human perception. And in particular, when humans search for life beyond Earth, we often search through the lens of what we already know. We look, for example, for Earth-like planets. We look for familiar chemistry. We look for signals that resemble our technology. And we imagine intelligence in forms that make sense to us. And we imagine as well civilizations in ways that shaped, for example, our own history. So, that makes sense because we do have to begin somewhere. We do have to have some sort of examples. But that reveals also another important thing, that we are not searching from nowhere. We're searching through human assumptions. And those assumptions sometimes can be far narrower than we do realize. Because even like, for example, here on Earth, humans do not always recognize life clearly. For example, we do not fully understand the living systems around us. We often reduce life into categories that do feel manageable. We sort, we label, filter, and define things. And very often, what does not fit our familiar models is ignored, misread, or treated as less real. So this is true not only for in how we relate to nature, but also in how we relate to one another. Even within humanity, recognition is incomplete. So human diversity, for example, is often not fully seen, not fully understood, not fully respected. We see this in the way many societies treat trans people, disabled people, people of color, and many others whose lives are constantly interpreted through systems that are not built to perceive them clearly. So I think a good question is, before we ask why the universe seems silent, I think it is worth asking a bit of a more difficult question, like, how good are we really at recognizing life at all? Because if we struggle to recognize the full reality of life here on Earth, including the diversity of human life, then it may be too simple to assume that the problem out there is merely absence. Maybe that problem is also about recognition. Maybe we're looking for life in ways that are too narrow, too literal, to shape our own perception. For example, we often imagine that extraterrestrial life would look enough like us to be recognizable. Maybe not physically identical, of course, but still close enough in biology, intelligence, behavior, or technology that we would know if we or when we saw it. So why should that be true? Why should life elsewhere mirror our own expectations? Why should intelligence express itself in the forms that we are prepared to notice? And why should other civilizations use tools, signals, or motives that fit neatly within human models? So this is where I think the Fermi paradox becomes a little bit more than a question about aliens, and is rather a question about projection. Humans are constantly projecting themselves outward. We do project our assumptions, our fears, our hopes, categories, our history into the unknown. And then we are surprised when the unknown does not answer back in a form that we can easily recognize. So perhaps there's a deeper issue, which is not simply that we have failed to find life. We're also searching for copies of ourselves. And if that is true, then the silence may not mean that the universe is empty. It just means that our methods of recognition are still underdeveloped. For example, we can detect planets, we can measure atmospheres, we study chemistry and radiation, we build remarkable instruments. But instruments are not the same thing as understanding. So detection also is not the same thing as recognition. And information is not the same thing as perception. And I think that this matters because life is not just a checklist. Life, even on Earth, exists in networks, relationships, adaptations, expressions, dependencies, and forms of being that exceed simple categories. And if life here already surpasses the narrowness of human systems, then life elsewhere may be even stranger. So maybe the real challenge is not only technological, but maybe is also conceptual. Maybe we need to expand not just our instruments, but our imagination too. Not just our search radius, but our definitions, data collections, and humility. Because the Fermi paradox is usually asked like this: if the universe is so vast, why have we found no one else? But maybe another version of the question is, if life is so vast, diverse, and difficult, even here to perceive in its fullness, why are we so certain we would recognize it elsewhere? And that version of the question interests me more because that itself turns the paradox inward. So instead of only asking whether we are alone, it asks what kind of minds are doing the searching, what assumptions are shaping our search, what are the filters limiting our recognition, what forms of life do we already fail to understand even now, and how much of what we call silence is actually a boundary in ourselves as well. And to me, that makes the Fermi paradox feel less like a purely astronomical mystery and more like a mirror, in a sense, that is held up to human perception. A reminder that the unknown is not only beyond us, but it is also beyond the categories through which we have been taught to understand the world. And maybe this is why I do not find the paradox necessarily depressing, but more like revealing, because it does suggest that before humanity can meaningfully search for life elsewhere, we may need to become better at recognizing life here, not only in biology, but in essence. Not everything is resembling of us. Not only in the familiar, but in the unfamiliar. And that fits not only our models, but it is, in essence, what is challenging them too. So if we cannot fully recognize one another, if we cannot fully respect the complexity of life on Earth, then perhaps our search beyond Earth will remain limited by the same blindness. So maybe the question is not simply, where is everybody? Maybe it is more that, what are we still unable to see? And maybe the answer to that question would change not only how we search the cosmos, but how we understand ourselves. I hope that you found this interesting. Hope that you learned something new today. I'm also interested in what you think about it. Feel free to leave a comment, and thank you for listening. Take care.